Welcome to the Outdoors Interviews of Rana. We are going to have a conversation with Laura Huggins today. Laura, thank you very much for the space, and you are going to share with us the ideas and experiences.
Thank you for having me. It's beautiful.
Great, perfect. Laura, what is your lecture or analysis about environmental movement in the US and in Latin America in general?
Yeah, in general, I've only been to Guatemala for a few weeks now. I have spent some time in Latin America, and I would say that maybe Latin America is 50 years behind maybe where the United States is today in terms of the general environmental movement. And maybe that's a good thing in a way, because the environmental movement in the United States really has become this regulatory state, which is very complex, and sometimes nothing gets done. Whereas here it's just really emerging, and so there's a lot of potential for enviropreneurship, that's what we call it. The pessimistic side of me says until people's bellies are full, it's going to be hard for them to really think about deforestation and mining and those kinds of issues that are very big in Central America and Latin America and South America too. But the optimistic side of me says, no, the entrepreneurial spirit is strong here, and maybe it's not perfect. There's not perfect property rights or contracts or markets, but they're definitely there and they're evolving. There's definitely an entrepreneurial spirit here in Guatemala City.
Great.
And in the greater Guatemala area. At first, when I first arrived at Guatemala City, I was surprised by all of the trash around, and the fact that there's a dump in the middle of the city is somewhat astonishing. But then when I was lecturing to my students, I remembered that New York City in 2001 had the largest dump in the world, Fresh Kills landfill. And that was just, a little more than 10 years ago. And they've transformed that landfill into a park today. And they're using the gas from that park and powering Staten Island. And so I told the students in my class here at Guatemala City about that. And they were very encouraged, like, why we could do that. We don't necessarily need government or, so they're very excited. And then when we move beyond Guatemala City, to explore some of the volcanoes here. We were very interested to see that we went to a national park here. And there was no one from the government at the national park, but there were private groups offering tours and starting to get a sense for tourism. And so we did go with one of the private groups, and it was a fantastic experience. And they were picking up trash along the way, and there was this sense of value for the environment.
Okay, perfect. It's a great vision and very optimistic, as you say. You have written some kind of books, and the last one that you have written, it's a very interesting title. Environmental entrepreneurship: markets meet the environment in unexpected places. Yeah. What are your findings in this book? I know that you have explored a lot of countries or experiences in the world. So what do you see? What are your findings in the book?
Yeah, sure. I was encouraged to write this book because so often I was told, free market environmentalism works in the United States and the United Kingdom and Canada, but it won't work for Latin America or Central or Southern America or Southern Africa. And we're finding the exact opposite, that entrepreneurship can work anywhere, that people like to make profit. They like to make green by being green. And that's basically what I was looking at in this book. I dive deep into case studies from Bolivia to Kenya to Namibia, India, looking at different resources from forests to land to ranching to fisheries. And the same concepts hold when we can establish property rights, when we can establish contracts and markets, that we see environmentalism flourishing.
Yeah, great. You have mentioned a very key elements or factors, like contracts or property rights, and here in Latin America and in Guatemala, actually there is a lot of issues about environmentalism, a lot of problems associated with environmentalism. What are your recommendations in this context, and maybe with that key elements to policymakers, to citizens and academics to improve our environmental performance?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is, I think that we have to really define ownership. We have a saying at PERC, the group that you mentioned in the States, that tree owners make the best tree huggers. And if you know that you are responsible for that asset, then you have an incentive to steward it for the long term. Even if you're the timber industry, right, you become a better steward because you want that to keep making profit for year 1, 2, 20, 50, and 70. And then beyond that, I would say we really need to think about the incentives for all of the players and make sure that they align and make sure that everybody wins. So from the policymaker to the industry to the private individual, we have to make the environment a win-win and not this sort of negative-sum game that we have going on, I think, here and also in the United States sometimes. We're figuring it out. And then another thing is to be able to think more in the long term, which is difficult when you're still a developing country, I think, when you're still, like I said, trying to meet basic needs of feeding your belly. But being able to think in the long term, an issue like deforestation, government, industry, private individuals begin to see that if you deforest, then there's these long-term costs like siltation running into the rivers, filling up the lakes. Then you have to get all that silt out of the lakes. It can cause flooding. All these things that are very expensive in the long run. So what we're seeing, companies in Costa Rica, for example, are figuring this out and learning to make payments for these ecosystem services. I'm thinking of an energy company in Costa Rica that's now paying the upstream landowners to not cut down their trees, because what they're realizing is when the trees are gone, the roots are no longer there to filter the water, to keep a constant supply of water coming down, which the energy company needs. And so they start these services because they see the value there for the long term. And I think that's probably coming to Guatemala. I mean, you might have a better sense as you're exploring free market environmentalism here, but.
Yes, yeah, very, very exciting, that term, free market environmentalism. And well, you have mentioned about making profit, and the incentives, the importance of the true and really positive incentives for environmental performance. What do you think about the link between freedom or economic freedom with the environmental performance? Do you think that property rights and contracts are part of this big concept?
Right, I think they definitely are. A lot of people have studied this, from the Fraser Institute to Yale University to the Heritage Foundation. Wall Street Journal does an index every year, and they monitor. They try to capture every country in the world, and they look at this freedom index. It's a lot of information that goes into it. And then we just look at the numbers, and they speak loud and clear that the wealthier, the stronger the property rights, the better off the environmental indicators are. So better air quality, cleaner water, and on and on. So it's not so much about my opinion, it's just looking straight up at the numbers from several different groups.
Perfect.
It's pretty powerful.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. We are very pleasure that you were in Guatemala making a teaching and knowing our country.
It's an amazing place. I'm so lucky that I got to be here, and
Perfect. We hope you come back.
I will.
Yes, definitely. So thank you very much to Laura Huggins, and thank you very much to you. This is our first outdoors interviews of Rana. Please keep in touch.